my wife asking me the question, she said, as we were trying to push legislation, which fell apart again, but I don't stop. I'll keep going. I actually like hearing the word no because it makes me work that much harder. But she said, if you get this legislation passed or if you get this initiative passed, do you feel like you've met the mission? You feel like you can stop? And the short answer is no. It just means I've gotten to that part of the mountain and I've got to go that much higher because that gives me the motivation to push further. Every day I wonder, what is the next step that I need to take? Who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to collaborate with? What do I need to do? And I don't always know the answer to that, but I do know that I'm not going to stop and I'm not going to give up on this because our kids didn't give up.
Right.
They didn't quit. They didn't. Their bodies quit, but they did not. And that's so important and so much more to me. So it means so much more to me than anything that I could have going on. I need to make sure that I complete that mission.
That's absolutely right. And again, treatment failed our children. Our children didn't fail treatment. They were up for the fight, but the fight wasn't fair. And it's our job to make the fight fair or fairer. And I know this analogy is a bit apples to oranges, but I think it still is apt. Think about what happened, Curtis, when the government, and I'm so glad they did, really opened up the spigot for COVID research. We had this national crisis. The country was shut down. People were dying. This was a brand new disease. And as a people, as a government, we turned on the funding spigot, basically unlimited. Go and do what you need to do, both private and public researchers, and get us out of this. And look what happened. We got out of it. And I often wonder what would happen in our world, our childhood cancer world, if the same approach was taken. Just think if Dr. Sondel in Madison or all of these other brilliant folks had the ability to tap into an unlimited investment. I don't know that we'd be curing these diseases, within a few months. But what I do know is we'd make a hell of a lot more progress than we're making now. And the other thing I know is these kids deserve it as much as we did during the COVID years. So I always try to sort of bring that perspective in conversations like this. I'll give you another quote. I'm a fan of quotes. It always seems impossible until it isn't. Nelson Mandela said that, or words to that effect. And it's true. Like, if we gave this problem the attention and the investment that it's crying out for, we could make dramatic progress. And I'm convinced, by the time that, our time here is all said and done, Curtis, we could have a dramatic impact. So we have to keep calling for that sort of focus and investment, not only in memory of our kids, but for the kid who's going to be diagnosed today. And as you said, there's going to be about 45 of them today in the U.S., and that's way too many.
It's one of those things, again, yeah, it's not, we're fighting now for the kids that are going to be diagnosed and the ones that are, the families that are going to hear those words right now. We're fighting for them, fighting to ensure that less and less and less of those families hear that diagnosis, or more and more research goes into catching these things early. We're big on early detection for adult-related cancers, big on early-related, but there's not so much early detection understanding for kids. We're worried about radiation. We're worried about all of this type of stuff, and that's all well and good, but I would rather catch something way earlier, because who knows if we would have caught these diseases earlier. Our kids may have had a better chance. We'll never know the answer to that, but maybe it would have been different. I know, you mentioned your pediatrician in the beginning. Our pediatrician, when the final diagnosis came, she called us and apologized. She said, "I'm so sorry that I didn't catch this sooner." And it's not that you didn't do your job. It's that you weren't looking for, and I understand this, you weren't looking for this big diagnosis. You were trying to kind of chase the symptoms as they were without it leading to something. Not all constipation in a child leads to brain cancer. It doesn't all lead up there. But when we put all the symptoms together that JC had over a couple of months, okay, now it all lines up with this exact diagnosis, but nobody was looking at that, and nobody would have, right? And And so giving everybody the tools, giving these scientists, there's no shortage of people. There's no shortage of bright minds. Giving them the tools that they need is going to be the difference here. I think it's going to be the difference maker, giving them the funding and the research labs and all of this and the tissue samples, because that's another big problem is tissue sample availability for some of these rarer types of cancers, giving them the samples they need to work with and utilizing these bright, intelligent minds at, let's just say UW. When I toured that lab, I was also given a tour by two research students, going through and listening to them describe their work and what they plan to do with it moving forward, and way smarter than me. Way smart to explain these things to me, and what they're going to do with it is unbelievable. And that's where our future lies right there. But we have got to give them the tools they need in order to succeed.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. I think, with the technologies that we have today, every day you wake up and there's some new technology that, you don't understand, but you're so thankful it exists for biomedical research. The tools that investigators have are much more developed and state of the art now than they've ever been. And I'm very hopeful that, these things are going to speed up the development process. And again, it's our job as advocates to make sure that kids with cancer don't get relegated to the back of the line in terms of priority. It drives me nuts when I hear about, we can't try this in kids first because they're kids, or we can't do this because there's no incentive and we've got to focus on adults. Kids should be at the front of the line when it comes to cancer care and research. And I don't care that it's rare. I'm thankful that it's rare, but, as the old cliche goes, it's not rare when it's your kid. However small, 45 new diagnoses a day might seem to some people, as we spoke about earlier, it's a crisis. And we need to get kids at the front of the line. And I will share with you that, these kids, JC, Evan, all these kids, they did nothing to contribute to or certainly deserve to get cancer. They didn't smoke, they weren't morbidly obese for decades, on and on and on. No lifestyle habits that contributed. They got cancer because of, that's a good question, right? Why did they get it? That's another unanswered question. But the point is that if any population deserves to be prioritized, not only because they're kids, it's because they did nothing to, impact their getting sick. So again, it's up to us, and I hope others join us to continue to raise our voices on this front. And I, just like you, that's exactly what we're going to do.
Yep. And I think that the fact that there's nothing, that's the biggest misunderstanding about childhood cancer, is that we don't understand why it happens. Whether that's the key to unlocking the cure, I don't know, but we certainly don't understand it. But the biggest incentive, which I guess I also have a big problem with the legislation, although it's positive, that has to create incentives for pharmaceutical companies and drug companies to actually create these drugs or these therapies. The only incentive should be that our future doesn't exist without these kids getting the treatments that they need.
Yeah. Well, I will say that I'm grateful that when Evan was in treatment, there were no FDA-approved therapies for neuroblastoma. These kids were getting the chemotherapy regimens that were developed for adults 50 years ago, and they were getting, I shouldn't say it in the past tense, but I will, in talking about, Evan's journey, receiving, ridiculously toxic doses way above what an adult would get, comparably, and no FDA-approved therapy specifically for the disease. And now we have three. We have three FDA-approved therapies for neuroblastoma. It's not enough. We need more, but there's progress there. I'm grateful for that. And maybe I'm just naive, eternal optimist, but I'm convinced there is a cure out there, or cures. I certainly know that there's less toxic therapeutic options that can benefit children like Evan, but I'm bullish on the idea that if we can't cure this disease, we can make it a manageable chronic disease by the end of my lifetime. I really believe that. And I believe that because I spend so much time with scientists and investigators who are spending every day of their professional lives trying to get us there. And I asked them this question, and the answer is yes, it's not unrealistic to think that, in the next generation, 20 years, we could have a situation where something like high-risk neuroblastoma, as awful as it is, could be a manageable chronic disease. And we have to think that way. We don't have, it doesn't do us any good to think, gosh, this is unsolvable. I think the opposite is true. We need to be optimistic, as difficult as that can be sometimes, and push forward and get there. And I believe we can do it. And we talk to newly diagnosed families, right? And that's a really difficult conversation. That's an understatement. It's just horrible conversation. But, when you say it's difficult to hear, but when you say, now there's never been a better time, it's not the right choice of words, but you take my point. There's never been a better time to face this fight than now. It's true. It's certainly true compared to when we were diagnosed. And it's certainly true 20 years from now or previous to now or going back, a couple of generations from now. The outlook is better. We just need to get across the finish line.
Yep. And I think the finish line it may not be in sight, but I can feel that it's there as well. And I know that in my lifetime that we're going to see significant progress in all of this. It's just a matter of getting enough people together that are speaking the same mind, the same voice, and getting people to kind of see it from our point, from our side. Like I said before, we don't want anybody to feel this. We don't want anybody to understand this. And in that sense, we just want you to realize that this is a real issue that is dramatically going to impact the rest of our lives if we don't fix it now and we don't fix it soon. And I hope that we get there. I'm not of the mind of the cure is already there. They're just holding out on us. I think we have incredible minds and theories and testing and stuff that's being done that are going to be proven to show that we're going to see some great things. And I truly believe that. And I believe it for the neuroblastoma world, for the leukemia world, for the Hodgkin's, all of this, all of the DIPG. I know any type of brain cancer, all of that. We're seeing all of this. There is progress that is happening. And again, it is falling on the shoulders of all these organizations, but that's okay because it's the people that understand it the most that are pushing the hardest. When you have that type of, incentive, there's no stopping what we're going to come up with or what we're going to say and what we're going to do and the progress we're going to make in just getting the rest of the world to hear what we have to say.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. And, I'll just add that I think part of the problem that we faced a little bit is there's a segment of the population that thinks that we've kind of solved this problem already because they've understood the dramatic increase in survivability for pediatric blood cancers, right? The dramatic progress for leukemia and, the fact that we can get such a high percentage of kids into a state of remission now. And that's a blessing for those kids. But there's two other important points there. Number one, what it takes to get those kids into remission, the toxicity of that, the brutality of that, the lifelong consequences of that being a survivor. It's far, far too toxic. Somebody said to me recently that a cure is not enough for kids, in this situation. And what they meant is, we need to cure these kids, but do it in a less toxic way. So that's first. And then second, when we kind of flip the coin and look at solid tumors in kids, the needle really hadn't moved that much. And I don't have to tell you that, right? And that's where I think I'm biased, but I think that's really where the most pressing need is. How are we going to bring about some of the same advancements for kids with solid tumors? And that's the piece that, sort of the general public, I think, maybe doesn't understand. And brain tumors, neuroblastoma, other solid tumors, these kids need to be prioritized. So that's another sort of piece of this that I think we have to push back against, this feeling I think that some folks have that, oh gosh, I thought we've kind of solved the childhood cancer problem. Well, we've done a lot of good work in leukemia. It's still not enough for those kids, and it's not nearly enough on the solid tumor side.
We do often hear that the survivability is higher, the percentage is higher. And I often refer to the specific commercials that we all see that the survivability rates are higher, the cure rates are higher, and kids are living longer and things like that. But the reality of it is, like you said, that the long and long-term side effects that these kids are dealt with every single year. It's almost to survive, you're going to have to deal with this for the rest of your life. And I'm reminded of a story that I first found a few years ago of when a bill was passed in Pennsylvania to provide more funding. That she had completed her treatment, she was declared NED, went in to see for that final appointment with her oncologist, and was given a notebook with the list of 12 different types of cancer she would be susceptible to based on her treatment. That is not okay. I mean, if you've never been, and I don't want anybody to see this, but if you've never been in a room when a child has to receive chemotherapy and the nurses have to come in dressed like they're going into the last 48, and then they have to make sure that the chemo bags, that the tubing, everything goes in its own special biohazard bags. You're told as a parent you can't get any of this on you, and the only type of chemo, there's one type of chemo, thiotepa, that will excrete through the skin, and if you get that on you, you're going to get burned. And the only question in our mind is, number one, we're saying we don't care about us, we only care about them. And number two, we're wondering, what is it doing to their bodies if we can't touch it? And that's not okay. When you sign the papers for your child to start these types of procedures, there's about 1 page that you have to read and about 12 pages of side effects. And that has to change. What we're doing with these treatments, what we're doing with these therapies, I do believe we're on the path of getting better in that sense. But all of these drugs that are going to our kids now and creating a lifelong, whatever they're going to deal with later on in life, and being declared cancer-free or NED, those are different. And once you get past that 5 years and the 10-year mark, it's not cured in a sense. It could come back later on in life, and a lot of times that relapse is so much worse than the initial cancer, and the side effects from the treatment can be worse than the symptoms you feel from the cancer. It's almost like we're going backwards in some of that, and it doesn't line up the way. It's an upside down pyramid at this point where you're getting better, but this is all the stuff you're going to deal with later on just to get you there.
Well, that's so well said. I just saw yesterday, looking through an old file, peer-reviewed article by a survivor entitled "It Takes a Lifetime to Survive Childhood Cancer." And I think that's exactly what you're saying. It's so true. I'll just piggyback on the treatment experience. I mean, I echo everything you said about chemotherapy and the evils of chemotherapy in kids. Evan also endured treatment that would leave children like Evan writhing in pain, screaming in pain, needing to be rescued with Dilaudid and morphine. And these were therapies that they would get every day for a week. And then you would recover, and then you'd go back, a month or two later, and you do it again, and watch your child, be tortured in that way. It's unspeakable. But we have to speak about it, right? We have to speak about it because people need to know. And the courage and the bravery that patients exhibit and survivors exhibit shouldn't be done in silence, right? We should be talking about it every chance we get. Sometimes it's difficult, but it's important. And I don't think we can talk about it enough because they've earned that, not recognition, but they've earned the value that comes, I think, with people learning about their experience. And hopefully, hearing about it will motivate folks to get involved and to try to make a difference. And you certainly don't have to be a parent or a sibling or a family member of someone to make a difference. As you know, we've got wonderful people in our community who just do it because it's in their heart. It's the right thing to do. And they've heard one of us talk, and they've decided that they're going to take up this cause. So I would encourage anyone listening, if you're looking for a way to make a difference in the new year, here it is, and join the fight, because every voice counts and every voice can make a difference.
100%. 100%. And, we do a lot of stuff here on social media and things like that to, raise money, but also kind of bring the community together. And we do have quite a few people that are part of this community that are not part of it internally and have just kind of gotten a sense of what we are and what we do and why it's so important, and they follow and they support. And it means the world, because you don't have to. You can be like honestly so many people and turn around and walk the other way and expect that it's never going to happen. Listen, we've all said it. We've all said it in our lives. It'll never happen to me. That could never happen. I can't believe it. And then you become part of that scenario, and then you have to go back and wonder, what the hell did I do to deserve all of this? What did our family do to deserve this? There's no answer to that. But now it's about how you approach it. And having so many people, and people ask also, is CureFest just for cancer families? No, 100% it's not. We love having people there that don't truly understand and that want to support what we're doing, because you see that it's so important. It's so important moving forward that our kids, that our families are protected, and you just want to be there for the right reason. So I encourage the same way. If you're looking to be a part of something, if you're looking to donate to something, if you're looking to just really learn more, reach out. None of us on these platforms and in this community are hard to get a hold of, or hard to find. I think it's pretty easy if you just have questions and just want to understand more. Oftentimes if people will ask, they'll ask, how many kids do I have? I'll say 3, because I have 3 kids. I have 3 daughters. One of them happens to be in heaven. But whenever I start to talk about that, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to, or I didn't mean to ask about it. No, I want you to ask. I want to talk about JC. I love talking about her all the time.
So true.
Yeah, don't ever apologize for asking the questions, because I want to talk about it.
Well, one of the reasons that I, really appreciated this invitation is it gives me a chance to do my favorite thing in the world, which is talk about my son. And so I echo that sentiment. It is difficult, and I'll just be honest with you. Sometimes I pick and choose when someone asks me, do I have kids? I make a snap judgment all these years later about that. I'm comfortable going there, and I'm comfortable with the person who's asking the question. Then I'll tell them about it. But if I'm not, I don't. And I used to beat myself up about that, when I would do it that way and avoid it. But I've given myself a pass over the years, because I think, you got to make some judgments to sort of, just kind of get through the day sometimes, right? But that aside, it is my favorite thing to do, to talk about Evan. And, I just well up with pride every time I do it, thinking about not only his journey, but who he was and who he would have become. I always tried not to focus too much on neuroblastoma, because that's not who he was. And he never, God, not one day over 4 years did he ever let neuroblastoma define him. He lived his life on his own terms, and the disease, was never in the day-to-day life of our son winning. He was winning. And so I try to, I've got to at least reference it because it's part of his story, but I try to talk more about him and what, like I said, who he was and what he would have become. And to your point, that's, it's really the saddest thing for the world, right? They're not going to have the brilliance of your daughter and the brilliance of my son. And that's where it really becomes a team thing, right? It's a community thing. It's not just a family thing.
Sharing our children's story is so important, mainly because they can't share it with the world right now, and they can't provide what we know that they would have provided to this world. And I love, and like I said, I love talking about her in the sense of who she was. And it's the same thing. I'll say yes, she passed from cancer, and then we kind of talk about who she was, and how she smiled every single day, and what it was like for her to have, her sisters around, and go to school at home virtually during COVID times, and what she hated, and be a part of everything, just kind of be a part of who she was. And I love talking about that. But I also love it. It breaks my heart, but at the same time, I love talking about kind of the kind of person she was every single day as a giver. And she only cared about other people. And these kids at such a young age, they grow up so fast. Number one, we need to treat them as if they're essentially adults, because they grow up that quick. I often say too that they learn to name and maybe even spell their chemo drugs before their ABCs, which is another issue that we need to fix. But they care so much about everybody else and not so much about themselves, And
I'm so glad you said that, because in talking about Evan, I frequently say he was the most compassionate person I've ever met, and that's true. And I always think there's one example that just sticks out in my head. We were in New York at Sloan Kettering, and they've got this beautiful playroom on the ninth floor for the kids. There was a kid who was having a really tough time, and it was Evan was the first person in this massive playroom to notice this, and the first person to go over and try to spend time with that child and comfort that child. And I'll never forget that. And you're right; these kids grow up so fast. And there's something about them. It's really hard for me to put my finger on it, but we see it every Wednesday when we're rounding the Treats and Treasures cards in DC. There's a wisdom and a strength and maybe it's almost like an old soul sort of perspective that you get from them, that you don't see in others. And I wish that everyone saw that. I get frustrated when I see, kids or anybody, getting upset and bent out of shape over the small things, right? This is something that I try to take from Evan, don't get worked up over the small stuff because it's not worth it. And you see people just, the smallest thing becomes the biggest thing, and it's so, woe is me. And that just pisses me off, knowing what I know and knowing what you know, Curtis, right? It's, you want to be able to say, let me take you to this, pediatric oncology floor and show you, what a real struggle is. I think about that a lot. Sometimes I'm more successful than others in getting past the small stuff, but I do try to keep that in mind because that's another lesson from kids like JC and Evan, right? You just gotta remember what's important in life.
Yeah. And I'm just as guilty of it as, some letting things get to you and letting things bother you, but then going back and realizing kind of what the hell was I worried about? You know what I mean? After seeing what they've gone through. And I say that, in a world where all of this is, the frustrations and anger and divide and things like that, and give yourself an opportunity. I mean, honestly, this is probably the best therapy program ever, is spend 5 minutes with one of these kids. Just 5 minutes with them and let them talk to you. Let them look into your eyes. And absolutely, they will give you a perspective on life that is really incredible. And it's, I don't know how much to look into it as this is a task, this is a job that they were given, their destiny to kind of pass that along. But they really pass along this type of perspective and this type of understanding on life that just makes you look at them and say, what am I worried about? What is, and I say that, the reason that I believe that she understood what was happening, or our kids understand what's happening, is the morning that JC passed, she was having trouble breathing. She couldn't speak at that point. She had lost her ability to really speak and communicate. And I looked her in the eyes and I said, "Are you okay?" And she looked at me and she shook her head yes. I knew she wasn't. I told my wife, I said, "Go get her sisters because I think it's time." At that moment, she went into that sleep that we unfortunately know too well. And I knew at that moment what was happening, but she still took it upon herself in that second to tell us that she was okay. That's what these kids do to us internally, what these kids do to us as parents. But that same lesson can be passed on to so many more people that don't worry about all this stuff. Don't worry about politics and family, just whatever, and road rage or all these things. Just focus on what's happening right now and what's important in life. And what these kids, and listening to the survivors speak, listening to them tell their stories, they're passing along that same message. And I feel like I hear my daughter, and I'm sure you feel like you hear Evan too, coming through those speeches as well, saying, "I'm fighting now. I've got through this, but here's my inspiration on life." And they just, I don't know, that week in DC every year, I think recharges and energizes anything that I've lost throughout the year.
Well, that's really well said. I'll share with you along those lines, Wendy, my wife, she was telling someone the other day about the Treats and Treasures carts visits on Wednesdays, and she said something so poignant. She said, no matter what's happening in, my life, the frustrations of the day, the crap traffic, getting there in the DC area, the things that can set you off, and some of that's sort of involuntary, right? You kind of You get worked up and you really got to work to sort of get past it. And she was saying, without fail, you're always sort of taking some kind of tension with you, into these visits because that's life. And she said the second you open up that first door, like it's all gone. And I was just listening to that and I'm like, that is so true. Like the second we open up that first door and see that first patient and interact with them and, give them a chance to choose from the carts, it all goes away. And, you are just right there with them and you are in awe of them, in awe of mom and dad, a range of other emotions too, certainly, sadness depending on the circumstance or whatever. But I think awe is the right word. It is awe inspiring. And it never, ever, ever goes away. It never gets old and it never fails to appear. We've been doing this again since 2012 every week, and it is the same experience every week. And there's a great power in that. It's an undescribable power. And I think that, I don't know how to translate that for people except to have them experience it. And I will say we do. We have guests. We try to get them to experience, but it wouldn't it be wonderful on a grand scale to have everyone, everyone in the world, just experience that. And I think we'd be a lot better off. I know we'd be a lot better off because you've got to be dead inside to not feel that feeling of being around these kids and being humbled and inspired and motivated. I think it is impossible not to feel that way.
I agree. It's 100%. And it's these kids, all the ones that we have met through everything that we've done in the past 4 years, whether it's through social media or it's through CureFest, our events that we've hosted, all the ones that we've met, the families, you become kind of instant family with all of them, instant friends. Like you draw to them, and to really just take away everything that they can give you in a heartbeat is incredible. And I really wish the same thing, that so many more could just feel this. If you're having a bad day and you're wondering what's the purpose of life and things like, it's like these kids at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old are giving you the purpose for life, and they don't even have to say anything. They can just look at you and that they've been through a battle, but they're still able to look at you and smile and say, how are you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Because that's what they are. That's the incredible humans that they are. And that, in a sense, is what we need more of every single day. And I wish we could just inject that into the world.
Yeah. These kids need to be celebrated and seen. I think that's the right word. They need to be seen. And, you talked earlier about the college scholarships program and, your thought about how kids, once they get past a real difficult journey with cancer, they shouldn't have, a lot of the obstacles that everyone does, college, cost being one of them. And I agree. I'll take it a step farther. I think if you're a survivor of childhood cancer, you should go to college for free. We should invest in that too. These kids have earned that. That mom and dad shouldn't be taking out loans and doing, we should go beyond just investing more in research and better outcomes for kids. We should be investing in survivorship care and things like college, right? Because I think about the GI Bill. What a great program that helps so many returning servicemen and women. In many ways, incredibly strong middle class after World War II. Well deserved, and one of the great public policy successes this country has ever seen. And even though I never wanted to describe Evan as a warrior, because I've just got a thing against that term, because I think of my son as a loving, compassionate, grateful person, and he was. But in another sense, he was a warrior, and JC was a warrior. And, I think that you get through this traumatic, awful experience as a survivor. We should be paving the way to a better future by investing in your future as a nation and with things like college. So again, I'm on my soapbox here, but I just think we can't do enough for these kids.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, these kids have, quite frankly, gone through war. They've gone through battle every single day, and all they want to do is move forward with their life, and they will face things throughout the rest of their life based on the war that they went through. We only a lot of times associate PTSD with soldiers, as we should. But at the same time, as families, as survivors, as children going through this, you have all of these types of symptoms and this stress and trauma that you've gone through. I mean, if you're able to provide them with something moving forward that takes that stress away, I can't think of a better way to kind of incentivize their futures. And they're going to go through something. When you go through something traumatic, you can often then provide a whole different aspect on it. You can a whole different insight on something, and to be able to go through college with that mindset. I mean, let's get this written. Let's absolutely get these kids going through college and have it taken care of by the country, by the world, essentially, where they fought this battle. And I can't think of a better way to let them know how important they are by taking that stress away from college. I mean, listen, I don't have anything against anybody getting scholarships to go to school. My daughter has scholarships going to college, 100% for grades and for that type of thing. But people get scholarships to play football, to play tennis, soccer. Why can't there be full ride scholarships for these kids that have gone through something like this?
No doubt about it. And your reference to PTSD is it caught my ear because I never really kind of thought about it that way until a few years ago when someone referenced it, saying, that parents, and certainly patients too, can have this, but parents can as well. And I gave some thought to that. And I think that's so true. And so many times that's unseen, right? But I don't know how you go through something like this and don't have, whether it's PTSD or, some other sort of effect from the experience. And I think there's a lot to be said for increasing awareness of that circumstance as well with parents, because, unless you've been there, you don't know. And I think there's so much that people can do to help ease that suffering with parents. And, it's funny, you've probably heard this or experienced it as well, Curtis, but so frequently in our community, we talk about how when you go through something like this, you find out who your friends really are, you find out, and so often you're surprised, right? You thought somebody was going to be there with you and they weren't. And then somebody who you didn't really think was, going to step up really did. And I think that discussion has been universal for me with parents. I don't think I've ever talked to a parent and talked about this and not had that be an experience. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is, that's another way to really support this community is, be there for certainly the patients, but also for the parents before and after, right? Whether the after is after a child passes or after they're out of treatment. And, people will ask, well, I don't know how to do that. And how do I do that? And my answer always is the best way to do that is to listen. Maybe ask a question, how they doing? Just, general question, and listen. Listening is such an underrated and undervalued skill and gift that you can give somebody. The power for someone to be able to tell you how they're doing, what their challenges are that day, and just have someone listen. I mean, it's priceless. So that if someone's looking for another way to help, they don't feel comfortable visiting a kid in a hospital room or getting in front of a member of Congress or raising money or whatever. That's another way to be a great resource, is just to listen.
Yep. It's the support question and the support topic comes up a lot. I know for us personally, and I know a lot of what I hear too, but the support needs to be more intense after, I think. But during, you get a lot. There's a lot of people there. A lot of people are at your doorstep, or they're giving you money or casseroles or they're whatever. They're there for you. And in the unfortunate passing of your child, in that sense, the support tends to drop off very quickly. And a lot of that reasoning is I don't know how to talk to you. I don't know what I'm supposed to say. And I've always said that I would rather you say the wrong thing to me and allow me to correct you than for you just to disappear, because that is so much worse. But unfortunately, it's very common in this sense, and I think maybe just in trauma situations in general, is that people don't know how to talk to you. They think that you're, let's just damage goods. And so to stay around almost is, in a word, I guess, contagious. And so they don't stay around. But I think, like I said, I think, after the passing, I think the support we need is more intense. We need you to be there more for us, just to listen, just to ask if we need you to pick up groceries or whatever the case may be. Like, little things like that mean the most because we know you're still there. But far too many people get in the support game for the wrong reasons. And as my wife will call it, when the freak show's over, people don't want to watch anymore. And I understand it. It's a circus, it's a train wreck, whatever, everything you're going through in your life, and it's, you're in the news or you're on social media and everything is happening all at once. And when all that kind of the dust settles, they don't know what to do anymore. They don't know what to do with their hands. So what do? They just disappear. And it's a shame, it really is, but the real true people that are there for the right reasons will stay by your side. And those are the real ones that you really only need anyway. But if you're in a position where you don't know what to say, just ask what you can do, or just be there to listen and say, do you just need to vent? Do you just need to talk? I don't need to say anything. Do you want to go get coffee? Just little things that kind of take your mind away from what's going on. You don't have to talk about cancer every single time you're together. It doesn't have to be the topic. Just be a friend.
Amen. Perfectly said.
So that is my soapbox, and I can go on about that stuff forever because I just feel like that is such a big part of this community, and I think it's getting better in organizations that are providing that support and providing, what you need and direction and things like that, but it really just is a shame that it falls off that quickly. So I would ask now, was there anything else that I didn't ask or that we didn't cover that you would like to talk about?
I think we had a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I can't think of any, major issue that, we didn't touch on. I guess as we're sitting here on, mid-December thinking about the new year, just maybe a plea to folks listening. If you're looking for a New Year's resolution, a great one is to get involved with the childhood cancer community. And if you only do one thing, that's one more thing that, has been done. And please, think about that maybe for 2025, because I can assure you that if you do, you're going to get twice as much in return.
100%. This is definitely something that if you're looking to, if you're just looking to find something that makes you feel good about yourself every day, it's being involved and watching these kids and watching what they can do and what they can give you and make your life better. And there's just really no other way to look at it. So if anybody would like to get involved or help out, reach out and find out more, where would they find the Evan Foundation?
Yep. They can find us on social media. They can go to our website, evanfoundation.org, reach out to me personally, and would love to talk with anyone about what we're up to or what the community's up to.
Awesome. So we'll put this in the description as well, but the evanfoundation.org, and you can check them out. And again, on social media as well. I found them. It's pretty easy to do, guys. All you got to do is you got to do the work. But like I said before, we're not hard to get a hold of or hard to find if you really truly want to know more about our personal stories or about this community in general. We're always happy to talk about it. That's why we're here. So I will always, at the end of the episodes, what I like to do is I like to ask the guest to leave the rest of the listeners with some advice that you would give to not only maybe, families that are currently going through this, but families that unfortunately will hear these diagnoses every single day. So that's what I want to leave them with.
To newly diagnosed families is be strong for your child, create a community of support for your child and yourself, both with friends and family and from our broader childhood cancer community. Surround yourself with medical experts. I think that's critical, and I would do that early on in the diagnosis journey. Don't just talk to one physician, however grateful you may be to that one oncologist. These are really challenging, difficult diseases in the childhood cancer world, so get to know the experts in the field as early as you can. And remember that there are positive outcomes here. The journey is difficult, but there is more hope now than there's ever been, and we're here to support you every step of the way.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for that. And yes, I will say on top of that, I will say you are, as parents, you are your children's voice. You are their advocate. You are in control. Therefore, you pick the team that is going to be the best suited for your child. Where you go, where you get treated, all of that, speak your voice. As maybe you might not think it, but I believe the doctors actually encourage the fact to have parents speak up for their kids and know what they want. Be a part of that, and remember, when you're in the room and your doctor's in the room, your child is their only patient at that moment. That is the only thing they are to worry about, and they stay there as long as you need to ask questions, and don't ever be afraid to ask questions. So I will say, Gavin, thank you so much for spending the time with me today and for sharing your story as well as Evan's story, the Evan Foundation. It has been an honor, like I said, getting to hear you speak every year at the caucus and at CureFest, and now being able to spend the day with you today. I appreciate what you're doing for this community, and I look forward to so much more coming from the Evan Foundation.
Curtis, thank you so much for all you do and this opportunity, and happy holidays to you.
Thank you so much, and we will see everybody else next week.